What's up, YouTube? Today I'm going to be doing a review on the movie The Wolverine. And it's going to be a critique, a discussion, a review, a talk on this whole movie. And I'm going to throw this out there. First and final, spoiler alert warning. I'm probably going to talk about the general stuff, so I'm not going to spoil it initially, but then I will get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff. So let's just get started. I really liked a lot of parts about the movie. One of the big things was the regenerative ability that Wolverine has. Oh, excuse my grammar. Regenerative ability that Wolverine has. Basically, you can cut him, shoot him, do anything, and he'll just heal up. And in this movie, he takes that to an extreme, and thanks to the magic of cinema and advances in technology, he was in this movie able to do a tremendous amount of healing regenerative power. So I'm just going to throw out the spoiler alert warning now. I'm just going to get straight into it. First and final spoiler alert warning. What happens is, again, you see this in the trailer. He saves this Japanese guy's life when he was fighting in this war in Japan, and basically he throws him into this prison that's dug deep into the ground like a hole. He covers him with this iron door, and then he pretty much protects this guy from what seems to be either an atomic bomb or just a really big bomb. I feel like it was the atomic bomb. And so after that, you see like the cinematic magic of cinema. That's probably horrible grammar, but the point is, you see him start to heal. Like initially, you see him afterwards, and he's just like charred. His whole body is charred. He has no hair anymore. He's burnt up, and then slowly but surely, he just regenerates completely. Now, this is a concept for anyone who has who's even moderately into X-Men and so forth. That this concept isn't new. In fact, if you've read any of the comics, I haven't, except for a couple that I just briefly read at the bookstore one day. This is an old concept, and in one of the comics I read, they took it to a much greater extreme. And I read this comic like a few years ago. Basically, in the comic, Wolverine, he comes down, and then he gets burnt to a crisp by another X-Men mutant who has fire capabilities and other capabilities, not the pyro guy in the films. But he gets burnt to a crisp, everything except for his adamantium, shiny, metallic skeleton. So then you see his whole skeleton, and then he's just lying on the ground, and the mutant leaves thinking he's dead. And then you slowly see everything regenerate, from the nerves to the skin and tendons, and then the whole shebang. And it was pretty crazy. And then he just comes back to life, and then just stabs this guy from behind before he can react. It's pretty insane. Obviously, I'm going to get into some of the things I didn't like, because this is a pressing thing. One big thing is the X-Men film series, not just this movie, which I feel like is an independent solo project that doesn't depend on anything of the prior X-Men films. But one of the big things is that they have to sort of decide certain things, and they've made choices that I don't think were that good. They decided to make it so that if his brain gets damaged at all, he loses his memories. And that was in the prequel to this, you could say, which was X-Men Origins The Wolverine, which basically he gets shot in the brain and he loses his memory, because even though it regenerates, he can't regenerate his memories, which was different from obviously in the comic I read, where his whole body got burnt to a crisp except for his adamantium. And this is one, and why I'm bringing this up is because in this movie, again, I already referenced it, when he got burnt to a crisp by the bomb, I thought it was really, really cool. It finally showed the strength of Wolverine. But at the same time, it was like a paradox. It was a plot hole because, first off, he should have lost his memories. Second off, technically, he should have been burnt much, much worse than that. I mean, afterwards they climb out of the hole and the entire landscape has turned from green to like black charred ashes. That's the power of an atomic bomb or whatever that was. And it was just crazy because I just thought it was unrealistic despite how cool it looked. And I really liked how cool it was and them displaying the concept of Wolverine's true healing capabilities. I remember back when they first started the X-Men film series, in like the first or second film, they were like pansies about it. They showed one scene where Wolverine gets shot in the head and he faints for like 5 minutes, and he can't get up until like a shake in the ground dislodges the bullet, and then he slowly recuperates and heals, and then he stands back up, and then the police officer is like, "Who are you? What kind of monster are you?" And I thought that was complete BS. And now, like in this movie, he's being shot all over the place, and he's just like, he's not even feeling it. I felt that was a disconnect. One could theoretically, backpedal and say, now Wolverine's much stronger than he was then. I mean, you can backpedal any plot hole technically, so I don't know about that. More importantly though, in this movie, back to what I was saying earlier, like he technically, from the bomb, should have been burnt so badly that all we saw was either his skeleton or just charred blackness. But instead, like, he was burnt really, really bad, and like you could still see skin everywhere. But I don't know, that's up to anyone else. And this is another thing that just eats at me, the whole Magneto thing, and Magneto being able to control Wolverine completely because he's made out of metal. That's always an interesting concept, and I just thought that was kind of stupid. Wolverine couldn't do anything. That means Magneto is much stronger than Wolverine, which defeats the entire purpose of Wolverine being so strong, in my opinion. And again, I have to reference the comics. The only reason I know about this one, because I'm not a comic junkie by any means, is because I googled some questions on Wolverine, and I went to Google Images and I found what I had already envisioned in my mind, like the question, why can't Magneto just rip out, he can control metal, right? Why can't he just rip out Wolverine's exoskeleton, adamantium exoskeleton, from his body? And then if you Google the right stuff on Google Images, you'll find like a picture. Magneto's like pulling, and then Wolverine's whole skeleton like just rips out of his body, and there's like blood and flesh everywhere. It's crazy stuff. Anyhow, back to the actual plot. So here's the thing. I really like the whole concept of the movie. I really like the fact that they used a lot of Japanese dialogue in it. Some people might have hated it, and it did go on slightly longer than I would have hoped, because you're sitting there for like 3 to 4 straight minutes and listening to Japanese dialogue that is not subtitled and can't be subtitled, otherwise it spoils the whole like dun 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 dun, like the point of the movie technically, because later on Wolverine asks stuff like, what did you say to her, and so forth. So I thought it was a little bit overdone, but it was almost like it was geared purposely to do that so that the Japanese audience that watches this will have more enjoyment out of it. But still, I mean, it was a little bit too much when you're sitting through like 4 minutes of dialogue that you don't understand. I mean, it was literally that long, and it happened 3 or 4 times throughout the movie. Anyhow, I really like the fact that they actually used Asian characters. They put them in the forefront. Wolverine and Hugh Jackman I really applaud that guy because he, as an actor, allowed this to happen. I know he really he wanted this movie out more than anything. He wanted like the Japanese sort of storyline with Wolverine. He wanted that to happen for a long time now. And it finally did, and I applaud him most for putting Asian actors in the forefront and treating them as real actors who have real capabilities and have masculine roles and are actually cool to watch. And he actually, you know, talks to them and associates them like equals. And I'm not a hater, you know. I don't blame the American industry for doing this and oftentimes portraying Asians either as sidekicks or comedic, you know, people to be laughed at on film and animation, because let's be frank here, some of these actors are just like that. Like their accents are so thick, or like even if you put them in a serious Robert De Niro sort of dialogue, they just make it sound so comical and unprofessional because of their horrible English. But this was good, you know. This wasn't that bad. They spoke English well enough. Slightly bad to the point where it was kind of sloppy, but well enough, and I applaud them for that. Moreover, let's look at the biggest thing. This movie overall, there's so many good things I want to say, and before I do, I want to get this off my chest. There is one bad part that I have to bring about. There's certain like lulls in the plot that it was just too simple. It didn't make any sense. One of them, and I'm gonna finally throw out the spoiler alert, first and final warning. So the grandfather, the guy who's dying, his son, right? I just thought him as a character, it seemed fairly good up until that final fight with Wolverine, because throughout the whole movie it's like, who's this mystery guy? What's he doing? Why is he fighting with the grandfather? Wow, he's really skilled at kendo and wielding the samurai sword, and he has all these relationships with all these dark people in the film. And then it just, in the middle of the film, when he finally dies, it just all falls flat because he seemed like such a central character. Like when Wolverine first set eyes on him, he was like, who's this guy? Who's this guy? He seems pretty strong. And then all of a sudden, like in the middle to end of the movie, he pretty much gets betrayed by the scientist who spits venom, and then he survives it, but then all he does is like grab his sword and start trying to kill everyone, and then he loses that fight, which I thought was just stupid as heck. He seemed like a manipulative, exceptionally intellectual guy, and his whole demise was just it was a demise of a buffoon, because he pretty much knew Wolverine could regenerate any wound, and he just kept trying to fight him, and then Wolverine lets him off, and then he still rushes back and tries to kill him, stabbing him through the chest, even though we all know that's not gonna do anything. Wolverine pulls it out of his chest, he heals again, then he kills this guy off. Really stupid, not logical by any sense of the word. I mean, this guy was running like one of the biggest corporations in Japan supposedly, and he wasn't smart enough to realize like he was fighting an unwinnable fight, and he should have just left. And it wasn't just like a matter of honor or emotion. Like, if it was, the actor didn't portray it right. I don't think it was completely the actor's fault. The dialogue just made it seem pretty bad. But I had to get that off my chest. Finally, what I loved about this movie, and I really think this can be extrapolated onto something huger, it was just this whole idea of Wolverine being this immortal being. This guy who can't die, who's young forever, but hates it. And this was a central reoccurring theme in the movie. Wolverine is this guy who's sort of lost all his purposes to be alive, but can't die. And that wasn't completely the case, because he was technically offered the opportunity at the start of the film, which was the whole premise of the film, to become mortal, and he declines it pretty quickly. So obviously he still has certain things he likes about life. But one of the best scenes, for me at least, by the way, I love the scene at the beginning with the bear, the bear being wounded in the forest, and him just fighting off all those things. But I just thought philosophically it was pointless, in my opinion. Sure, it probably would have made the whole theater erupt in applause, just him fighting for that bear. And I really liked that too. But the problem was, from a philosophical standpoint, it was useless, because technically this guy was using illegal stuff, right? But the crossbows and the people selling them and all that stuff, all that was being distributed throughout the nation, and there's probably hundreds of thousands of guys just like him. And so here's Wolverine fighting for the cause of this one poacher or whatever, for playing around with this bear and like torturing this bear. And I just thought, sure, you can go about life saving things one bear at a time. But I mean, that's why I really have to give it up to certain politicians, because not all politicians are corrupt, and they are looking at a macro scale, and that's one of the things they are fighting. I mean, it seems stupid, but they're fighting for the same thing Wolverine fought for in this movie, but on a macro scale, and that's like nature preservation and so forth. But whatever. More importantly, the biggest theme I loved about this was just this Lone Ranger thing, and this whole thing about immortality, and the fact that it's not something that's so great. Here's a guy who's been gifted with immortality, and it's become a sort of curse to him, which is crazy stuff. And it just constantly begs the question of, as mortal beings, can we even live immortally if we were given that gift? Maybe we, as finite mortal beings, we aren't designed to be immortal anyways. And the biggest scene that represents this was when it was that flashback again. They flashback multiple times to that Japanese war, probably World War II. And then after Wolverine saves that Japanese soldier, who happens to be the grandfather, the Japanese soldier asks Wolverine, "How old are you?" in an almost shocked state of mind. Probably coming from a sort of cultural, traditional Japanese sort of vibe, where they probably at the time still believed in sort of deities and spirits and monsters like Wolverine to actually exist. So the soldier's kind of awed, and he's like asking Wolverine, "How old are you?" And Wolverine responds something like, "I'm really old. I've gone through a lot of wars, a lot of effing wars." And he obviously curses. I'd rather not curse to keep this more professional. And I thought that was just astounding. The way he said it, perfect. Why? Because it's just perfect. It's how Wolverine would respond. It's how someone who has lived for maybe 500 years and is in a lot of ways sick of humans, sick of how humans fight with each other, would respond. And it went beyond this sort of cartoony Marvel superhero film. It was something bigger than that. And again, I'm going to reference another flashback. Right before that, he asked him some. He says a Japanese word. Wolverine doesn't know what it means. Then he says pain. "Do you feel pain?" And Wolverine's like, "Yeah, a lot of pain." And I mean, that is a crazy revelation for me, because I mean, I already knew it already, but I mean, it may be a huge revelation for you. Wolverine's, like, when it's not like he doesn't feel the bullets going through. He's not like Superman, where the bullets just bounce off and he doesn't feel anything. He actually feels the bullets go in. He hurts. He probably gets desensitized to it at times, but I mean, in that scene, he had just lived through the burning of an atomic bomb explosion, and he was burnt to a crisp. That would have been a lot of pain, and no matter how much desensitization you have when your skin's being burnt off, like, you probably haven't experienced too many bombings before that. So props to Wolverine as a character. Great. That was one of the best scenes. It only lasted like 4 seconds, but I thought it was a lot better than a lot of the other stupid ones. And other than the drawn out fight with the guy I was talking about, and the ending where I just thought was stupid, the other thing was the venomous villain, who we all knew from the start was a villain, just by the way the camera angled on her a lot before it was revealed, and how she looked and like stared at people. It was too obvious. I thought the character was fairly good, a little too similar to Poison Ivy from DC Comics, but fairly good up until the point where she sort of loses her hair and gets and is bald. I mean, that just wasn't too attractive for me. It kind of made me like, I mean, it's okay to be grotesque and disgusting if you do it to the extreme, but that was sort of like neutral to slightly disgusting. That's like the worst, when it's just like a bald lady. More so, I felt like it was good up until that point, because before she had done she used her powers in different ways. Like, she would stick out her tongue, and like people would just like turn into like their whole face would be covered in like scales and poison, and then like she'd breathe out fumes and stuff. But then, like, at the end, for that 20-minute final fight, she was just like spitting venom. She was just like, and then like venom would shoot like 20 feet, which was probably added in later. But that just seems so lame, like her constantly doing that. I thought she had a larger arsenal of superpowers. Finally, again, I do feel Hugh Jackman was a little bit let down, even though like the project already has been finished up, because I knew he wanted like certain concepts to be used up. According to a few interviews I think I watched him conduct on the movie, he wanted this to be in like forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think he wanted it to be actually in the olden Japanese days, back when there was actual samurai, and he wanted this whole premise to be where Wolverine goes to Japan and he's super cocky, thinks he could beat up anyone, and a ordinary regular samurai just kicks his butt. And that was like one of the big shining premises he wanted the whole movie. I thought it'd be astounding, because it just showed how even with superpowers, a simple human being has the potential to kick Wolverine's butt. Just a regular samurai. And it showed it's a lesson in humility and so forth. And I think the whole reason why that didn't occur was because of the previous video, which sort of screwed up the timeline. It made it so that Wolverine was born in an era after the standard Japanese era with the samurai, and for Wolverine to have grown up and finished that movie way after that samurai era, because in X-Men Origins Wolverine is like, when he's an adult, there's already motorcycles, cars, factories, which you all see in the movie, and like very expensive equipment. So it was kind of like, it wouldn't really make sense for him to travel back in time, at least not in this setting. And then we have to get to the next one, which, by the way, I'm just astounded how many of these movies they're pumping out. There must be a huge demand. I'm going to reference the sort of what do you call it, teaser ending. So after about 5 minutes of credits in this film, there's a little cutscene that references the next film, which I think is going to be potentially even better. I mean, X-Men First Class was just, I watched it. I think I watched it by myself. I can't remember. I actually went to the theater and bought a ticket and watched it with myself, I think. But yes, I'm a bit of a loser. Anyhow, long story short, X-Men First Class, it was but the next one was great. Basically, the cutscene was Wolverine's at the airport, and then he sees like everything that's metal, like coins. The metal detectors start shaking like crazy, and then he turns around and like pulls out his claws, but then immediately gets frozen. Why? Because Magneto's there and he can control Wolverine. And then time sort of freezes, and then you see Professor Xavier pull in, and he's like pretty young now. So first I'm like, okay, does this mean that this next movie took place before X-Men 3? Because in X-Men 3, the film, Xavier and Magneto were dead. So it confused me, and then I'm like, maybe not, and then Wolverine says, how is this possible? So I know, okay, this comes after. This is great. So Xavier responds, like I once told you long ago, other people have powers just like you. And then it ends there. So obviously, you know, it's another teaser for the next X-Men film, which is called Days of Tomorrow Past or something like that. The whole premise is based off a comic series. You know how if you read X-Men comics, there's a lot of sort of arcs or plot series, and that is pretty much going to be about, like, from what I've been told, all these X-Men have sort of realized that something is going on with their universe that's caused by a parallel universe, and so they have to travel back into the past, but they can't send everyone. They can only send like a few people to fix the timeline, because I guess Xavier and Magneto, back when they're young in this alternate timeline, are doing weird, screwed up things that their timeline self were not doing. So it's very interesting, and we'll see where it goes. Will this be the last X-Men film? I think it all depends on how much money they make. But even if they do make a lot of money, it'd be hard. I mean, you have to run out of ideas eventually, right? Because, I mean, you've covered a lot of bases. But technically, you can keep going and keep going with the hundreds of comics and series that are produced. Anyhow, as always, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments below.